Hello, my arties. This is Nancy. Thanks for joining me on this adventure. I have some things planned out for this spread, and some things are kind of vague in my mind. It develops. There's joy. So I'm doing a prompt. Pick a song that makes you feel better when you listen to it. And my first thought was Cyndi Lauper's song, True Colors. There's a line, you with the sad eyes. So I'm doing this portrait with sad eyes. I've never done this before, but I'm doing this cartoon eyes in a somewhat realistic face. I'm doing watercolor. The way I like to work with watercolor is to use very watery paint. Do it in layers. So there's not much pigment, lots of water. Do a layer, let it dry. Add another layer. This gives you a lot of flexibility, a lot of fine detail. You can always add more pigment, but when you have too much pigment, that's another process to dial it back. So I'm using that black and white source photo not to copy that face, but strictly to get a better idea of where the shadows and highlights hit, particularly on the forehead and the nose and the cheekbones. So I'm sneaking up on the lips with a very light color, and then when I get something that works, then I'll go in with a little more pigment so I can change things as I go. I'm doing little lines for the little lines in the iris. Now I'm ready to add more pigment, starting with that left side where there's shadow. Lots of shadow under the neck. I'm using an apricot color, and those eyes were way too intense for the rest of it. So I'm taking some gesso mixed with water to dial that back, and that's working better. And then going back in to add more pigment around the edge of the iris. And that integrates better with the face. Now I'm doing some shading and highlighting around the features to give a more naturalistic feel, a more three-dimensional illusion. This nose just was not working. It looked like this weird kind of Picasso slab. So I went back in with pencil and eraser to try to get that more natural looking, changing the shape of the end of the nose and softening the shadow. And that's working better. It's all illusion. Now that was too dark, too much pigment there on the forehead, so I'm going in with gesso on top of the watercolor. Gesso mixed with water will be translucent. Lighten that up. And some gesso highlights on the eyelids. Now I'm going to do anime style highlights on the eyes. Gives this wonderful liquid look. 3 spots of slightly different sizes. Give that really liquid look, and now I want them bigger. Yes, I'm happy with that. Now more detailing, highlights on the lips, dialing back the shadow that was too much. The line of the nose, where does that end? I don't know. Too high, too low. There, now I'm fixing those lips, relaxing them just a little bit. I want it to be sad, but not compressed. Now here we go with the hair. There's a little appearance of my palette knife guy that I used in the intro. I have this beautiful dyed tissue paper that someone in my art journal group is giving away. Yes, I'll take some of that. At this point, I have no idea how I'm going to integrate the tissue paper area with the realistic watercolor portrait. I will figure that out when I get there. I've been doing this for a while. I have confidence. I'll figure it out when I get there, and it will be surprising and so much fun. So with watercolor, I find it works nicely to do a wash of just plain water and let that partially dry so that it's no longer shiny but still damp. And then you get your area and you don't have weird edges where you don't want, or blossoms. And I put a butter knife down. It prevents buckling. It still buckles, but it's not as severe. Adding some gesso to lighten the purple was a little too dark. Starting to integrate the watercolor and the tissue paper. So there's a line in the song, "The darkness inside you makes you feel so small." Here is the symbol of the darkness, is gesso mixed with black watercolor paint through the stencil. It was pretty watery, so it kind of spread out a little bit more than I wanted. On the right side of the page, I want to have a lot of bright color. So I'm putting some modeling paste through a stencil to have a nice clean white surface to put in some vivid little spots of color. Oh, and then there's that moment of lifting the stencil away. So thrilling. Trying to make that gap around the spiral binding less prominent. So then here was my idea of how to integrate the watercolor hair and the tissue paper area, I mix some gesso with the watercolor apricot color. I like the way it's working. It's an interesting challenge here. The left side is watercolor and the right side is gesso mixed with watercolor. Playing around with making that all one thing. Doing some streaks of gesso so that the hair is not so flat, one color flat looking. It's got more depth. And the modeling paste through a stencil leaves sharp edges, so I like to go in with a Dremel, smooth those down. Now those black shapes that was supposed to represent the darkness inside, but it kind of just looked like part of the shirt, so I wanted it to be clear that it was the darkness inside the person, so brought it up onto the neck and a little bit on the right side to make a better transition between the left page and the right page. Got the hair working, and I'm going in with more shading, more detail. And what I love to do with watercolor is I'll do a stroke with the pigment and then I'll go in with water and smooth one side. I am carrying through this color scheme that I intended of purple and orange and green, the hair being the orange or related to orange. And then while I'm doing the background, I like to do a dark edge so that that blends in. So now I'm hitting those white shapes, so that the white shapes, that's the true colors. I'm starting with the silver pen to get the shiny. I've done some watercolor pencil on these little white shapes in green and orange and red, and then I'm activating them with water with a brush. Now I'm working on the background, give some texture to the background with some watercolor through the stencil. Not caring too much about precise edges. And then on that side I decided to just put some paint directly on the stencil and use it as a stamp, which makes some puddles, so I wipe the puddles up with paper towel. Have something subtle in the background, but interesting. Been doing a spring green, and now I'm going back with the phthalo green. That needed to be darker around the spiral binding, so it would be less glaring. So I've done my lettering, the lyrics to the song with the Inktense pencil, this wonderful color chili red, and then activating it with with water on a brush. So at this point I decided I did not like these long purple tissue paper shapes. I'm using some dark paint, watercolor paint, to break up those shapes and darken the places in between. It's kind of the feeling of paving stones. So it's a more subtle detail. And then I realized I love this color for the lettering, but I only used it for the lettering, so it seemed to clash with the rest of what I had. So I decided to add that color to the hair to harmonize the lettering. I find it best to not use a color for just one thing or in one place, but to carry all my colors throughout the piece. It gives a better unity. It's more pleasing to look at. Now I was just delighted with makes the hair a little more vivid, harmonizes with the lettering. I'm happy with the piece. I'm doing some edging. And here I'm making that corner just as dark as I can get it with that dark green to balance the face. As the face and the eyes are very intense, and it pulls the weight to the left. So that dark corner in the right balance. More silver, shiny. Love that shiny. Bringing more shiny and more color to the left side to have a softer transition between the black and the color. More edging to frame the piece, to guide the eye. There it is. Thank you so much for watching. And please check out my stencils on Etsy. Please like and share this video. For more of my art journal pages that I documented step by step, check out my blog.